All right. So if you're seeing this, just maybe make a comment. I want to see if those are coming through. All right. So it's been a little while since I've done one of these live videos. It's been about 3 weeks, I think. Quite a bit's happened in the last 3 weeks. Notably, SpaceX launched a couple of astronauts into space. If you see me looking around, it's just because I've got Instagram up here, and then I've got the rest of the broadcast up here. Anyway, SpaceX launched a couple of astronauts into space, and then kind of like under the radar, Elon also shot up a whole bunch of satellites as well. And I think that's going to fly under the radar a little bit because what he's trying to do is produce an internet service that is satellite based rather than our current version. And the benefit of that is that he's going to be able to get high speed internet out to a lot of people who like myself are living out in the middle of nowhere. So that's going to be kind of interesting if he's able to kind of pull that off. On a more personal note, we did our gender reveal. So we're having a boy. We're due in October, and we're pretty excited about that. So that'll be interesting. And it's been kind of funny because my girlfriend, she thinks we're like really behind in the process. So she's been ordering a lot of stuff, and I've ordered some stuff, and so now our kitchen is filled with things like packages of diapers and whatnot. And it's funny because, like I said, she feels like we're a little bit behind, and I'm like, it's not till October. We got all the time in the world. So it's kind of funny, the back and forth that goes on between us. And then the other thing that's happened more recently is, of course, the atrocities down in the States and this sort of modern day civil rights movement that's going on and kind of continuing. And I won't comment too much on that, but I do think there's some decent videos that are worth watching. David Goggins has one up on his page that's pretty good. Kind of gets to the point where people need to work together to actually make this thing work, or to really get this thing moving. Dave Chappelle had a pretty decent video as well that kind of speaks to the emotion behind the situation. And then I think it was Brett Weinstein was on Joe Rogan, kind of breaking down what could be part of the pitfalls of the movement as well as some of the benefits and whatnot, and kind of where that's all leading. And then Sam Harris started a conversation as well that's worth checking out. And then the final thing that sort of happened in the last 3 weeks here in terms of sort of the 4 top highlights for me would be that we've got an opening date for Good Life Fitness. So in Saskatoon here, we're going to be opening the club on the 29th. That'll be interesting to see how that goes. But we've been working diligently kind of behind the scenes, more so the fitness manager and general manager, not so much myself. I've been kind of doing a lot of other things on the side, but I've had the opportunity over the break to talk with a lot of kind of high-level CEOs and that sort of thing. And it's been a really interesting conversations. There's a lot of talk about work-life balance and that sort of thing. But one common theme that seems to be coming up is that businesses are really going to have to become a lot more consumer centric. And I think that's something as consumers we also need to be aware of. And ultimately, where things are starting to break down for them is as businesses are starting to reopen and try to get basically spending the next 2 years rebuilding themselves. One of the things that's lacking is just a sense of really good leadership. And that was kind of the topic I wanted to touch on today, is really, being leaders within ourselves and for our businesses, and how businesses can be leaders themselves as well. And part of that is going to be, breaking down what some of the qualities of a leader really are. So one thing that a good leader knows, and this should be fairly obvious, is that they actually know where they're going. So they have a good idea of where they're going. They have a destination in mind, and that's what actually creates an ethic for them. And if they're really good at what they do, they're able to communicate where they're going and how it's going to impact you and why it might benefit you as well. What a good leader doesn't want to do is motivate you. All right. So motivation is a great tool, but it's also something that's really fleeting. So for example, if I needed a hole to get dug, I could motivate somebody to dig a hole. That's a fairly easy thing to do, but if the weather's not permitting or it's too hot out or it's raining, that guy's not going to be out there very long wanting to dig that hole. But rather, if I could communicate that hole that he needs to dig is going to create some greater purpose for both of us, I'm going to be a lot more successful in convincing him to be out there and actually digging that hole. So like maybe we're building a house or something like that, right? So you need to figure out something that's really worth doing, and it should be something that's quite substantial. It should be something that's going to take up a good portion of your life, something you can really commit to, and it needs to be something that's really deep and significant. And if you're any good at what you're doing, as a leader or, for yourself as well, you're going to be able to communicate that to somebody else. And then if you're really, really good at it, you're going to be able to relate that sort of purpose of yours to what the other people, what the other people's purpose is as well. All right. So essentially what I'm saying is that if the statement I'm making when I say something like that is that, if we're going to move forward with each other towards some purpose, I'm going to have to convince this person that, here's what we're going to do. And on top of that, I need to convince you why it's more important to be doing this than anything else that we could be doing right now. Here's what's in it for me, and also here's what's in it for you. And here's why us working together is going to further that is going to further what's in it for me, and it's going to further what's in it for you as well. And so if I'm any good at that, the people who I'm leading will be able to relate to why it's important, right? So they're going to feel a sense of importance from it. And then, of course, I have a sense of importance as well. And this basically boils down to what I think he was a developmental psychologist, Piaget, called an equilibrated state, which is essentially, it's a state where everyone involved is participating voluntarily. So rather than being told that they need to do something, they actually volunteer into the activity. So a great example of this is something like a game like tag. So if you think about some kids, they decide to go out and have some fun. They decide to play a game of tag. So, all right. So we need to decide, okay, first of all, who's it? Maybe somebody volunteers to be it, or you come up with a process to decide who's going to be it. And then that person runs around and tags somebody else, and then they're it. And we've all sort of agreed upon that these are the rules of the game. And then as this game develops, maybe we decide that, hey, the tire swing is home or free. You can't tag me when I'm on the tire swing. So that becomes part of the game and part of the rules. And we all agree that that's okay, fine. And, maybe as this game develops over time, it becomes, well, instead of just having one person that's it, every time that person's that is it tags somebody, they also become it. So now you've got two people who are it, kind of trying to tag everybody else. And eventually that's sort of how the game progresses. And this idea of an equilibrated state also comes up when I'm dealing with clients. So I've had the opportunity to talk with a lot of artists and kind of come up with business plans for them as well. So when it comes to clients, as well as trainers, by the way, one thing that I recommend artists do is to actually bring their clients into the design process. So the way this sort of works is somebody will hire you to say, create something. And so they'll give you an idea. And so I'll write it, you write it down and you do some sketches or whatever it might be. And you send that back to the person. You say, hey, what do you think of these? And they're like, oh, I like this, I like that, but change this or that. And so they give you that feedback. And then you send it off again. What do you think? They come back, well, And then I'll do like 2 or 3 designs. So I'm limiting their options. And then I send that off to them. And then they're like, I like this, but I want purple or whatever. Great. And then you've got a happy client. And then they're going to hopefully seek your services out again in the future. And I do this with my training clients as well. So this week I'm working on developing exercise programs for all of my clients. And what I did at the start of the week is I basically asked them all, what do you like about your programs? What would you like changed? I'm going to be developing a new program for you. So we're all entering sort of the next phase of their programming. And a lot of them got back with me, gave me some feedback and that kind of thing. And then also, we kind of looked at like, are you going to be in a gym? Are you going to be at home? So I'm really integrating them into the programming phase as well. And what you'll find is that you'll end up with clients who stay longer, and then they're also a lot happier with their programs as well. And another place that we see this sort of voluntary participation is in things like with sports. A great idea. I like teaching jiu-jitsu as well and participating with that. Something that we the most enjoyable aspect of jiu-jitsu for a lot of people is, quite often it's at the end of the session and, you start rolling. And what that is it's essentially an agreed upon time and an agreed upon set of rules where it's like, maybe both of us have decided that, wrist locks are kind of a dirty game. So we're not going to wrist lock each other. We're not going to go for submissions and that kind of thing. And what happens is all this unique things start to evolve and start to happen in the middle of those roles. And we start to find ourselves getting better, and we end up improving our techniques and that kind of stuff. And it's all based on this idea of having a voluntary game. I don't know why my dogs are barking. Anyway, essentially what's being created when we enter these sort of states is that a game that is created with everybody involved and has everyone's input is going to be far more sustainable. So we might be thinking, well, how are we going to implement this kind of into our careers and our jobs and these sort of things? And well, one thing you could do, if you're the employer, even if you're the employee, is you could take some time, maybe 3 or 4 hours or something like that, and create a career plan about how you're going to contribute to the organization, right? So it might be the case that they've asked you to come up with some sort of plan on how you're going to contribute to the team. And that's a good way to kind of go about it. And it's really common and typical among, a lot of corporate companies, but I think we can actually make something a little bit better. I think we can make that a lot better, actually. Rather than creating a plan on how you're going to impact the organization and what you might do within that organization, a better plan would be to create a plan for your life that also includes this job. So you want to create a plan for your life that includes this job as sort of a subset of that overarching plan. So for example, maybe your plan is that, you're going to be the president of the United States, but right now you happen to be, working the front desk at a gym. Okay, great. We've got an idea of where you're going. Now, how does your role right now at our business integrate into that plan? And spend a long time thinking about that. This is certainly not the type of thing that I'm going to be able to provide the answers for you. It actually needs to come from the person, but it's an interesting exercise to do, because what you'll find is that when your company or your business or whoever it is you are kind of puts a plan for your life in place, or asks you to create a plan for your life that includes this job, it has to include this job as a subset of that plan. Then what they do is, and they won't tell you they do this, but they do this, is they put you basically in a head-to-head competition against all the other employees in this business. And they're going to come up with some sort of protocol as to determine who is the best at doing the job, or who's the most productive, or whatever it is. And what we find is that the most productive people will be the ones who formulated a plan for their life, and not necessarily the people who formulated a plan just for how they're going to impact their career. And on top of that, the other thing it tells you is if you can't figure out how your current employment integrates into that higher purpose that you're searching for, it's probably going to be time to find a new job. For example, with the presidential example, I mean, it might be the case that we can't figure out how working the front desk at a gym is going to get you towards that higher purpose, in which case maybe you need to find another job. And so I'll give you a bit of an example of this. I was working with one of my employees, and he was good at what he did. He definitely had some strengths that were worth, there's areas of the job that he was really good at, but his motivation was not the best. So he, and I really, really felt for this guy because he was really good at a particular role. And then he was asked to be put into another role, which he didn't actually want to do, but he was told that if he excelled at that role, then he'd get the role that he really wanted. So it was like a stepping stone. And so, like I said, I really felt for this guy. And I sat down and I talked with him. I was like, okay, I know you're in a role that you don't want to be in, but I also know that, I basically asked him, like, I know he wanted to move up or wanted to move on from that position. And so I asked him, I was like, how do you feel? Like, how do you see yourself getting there? Let's develop a plan. And so he sat down and kind of figured out a plan. We met up a couple of days later and we kind of sat there for, probably a couple hours or so and kind of formulated a plan to integrate his success into the business. And so off we went, and there were definitely times where, he was doing really well, but then, productivity would fall off. Like he'd have a really high month and then that'd be followed with like one or two really slow months. And it kind of like kept this sort of undulating roll going and so I spent like weeks thinking about it. And I said to him, I was like, we sat down again and I said to him, I was like, all right, so I know where you want to be in this business and I know how you want to get there, but forget all that. Forget about the common answer or the answer that I want to hear or the answer that the company wants to hear. I want to know at the end of the day, at the end of your life, what is the narrative? What do you want to accomplish? And I sent him off and I said, think about this for a while and come back. We'll talk about this in a couple of days. And sure enough, we sat down later on and I asked him again. I was like, all right, so what did you come up with? And he kind of came up with a plan of where he wanted to be in the future and kind of what his future self was going to look like. And then I said, all right, that's great. Now, how does what you're doing here fit into that? How are we going to kind of build you up to where you want to be and accomplish all the things that you want to accomplish in your life? I want to see you do this stuff. But how does this fit into it? And so he thought about that for a long time. And a few days later, we sat down again. Maybe it was even a week later. I can't remember. And he came up with something. And I thought it was really good. I thought it was a great plan. I said, okay, I think we're on to something. And so we sat down together and I had sort of all the protocols that needed to be met on more of a corporate, the corporate side of things or, whatever you want to call it. And he had all the things that he wanted and he wanted to achieve in his life and whatnot. And we sat down and figured out a plan. And all right, so now we had a plan for his life. And then we had a plan that built into that life and how he was going to proceed. And sure enough, a year later, this guy went from, to be honest, I thought we were going to lose him at probably more than once at the time, whether or not, I figured he was either going to move to a lesser role within the company, or he was going to move laterally to another company altogether. But ultimately, it would have been just, I felt like he was going to sort of downward spiral into this sort of spiral of misery. And, that would be, the end of it for him, sort of thing. And off he would go. And, kind of an unfortunate story. But a year later, after formulating this sort of plan, he's now, I'm really happy to say he's in the top 10% of this entire company. And this is not a small company. We're talking about a business that's got like probably 500,000 employees, and he's like at the very top. And it all came from formulating a plan for his life. And that's really what it was about. So as we're kind of getting back into our roles, what we need to understand is that the entire purpose of being in a leadership role, or the entire purpose of your own role, is to create that overall direction or point. And everyone that within your organization has their own point, but they're all integrated into that overarching point. So everybody's headed in the right direction. And that's going to maximize your success, and it's going to maximize your happiness. And when you do that, you're not going to have to worry about this weird work-life balance situation that's going on. It's not even an issue anymore. All right. So that is all I was going to talk about today. On Friday, I'm going to be talking about core training. I've got some stuff that I've planned there, and it's definitely worth checking out. Probably around 9 or 10 a.m., something like that. I'll post something up before I actually go live, but you're going to want to check this one out for sure. This is all going to be all about core training, my process in core training. I've had a lot of questions about it, and I'm going to go over everything there. If you're someone who studies Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you are absolutely going to want to check this one out. All right. So I will see you on Friday for sure. I'll try to come on tomorrow as well with something else to talk about, but thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.